Hello, everybody. Welcome to our contract webinar. We are going to be talking all about how to protect your business from the unexpected today. So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Mac. I am part of the product education team here. So I've been an employee with HoneyBook for how many years that is, since 2017. So I've been around for a while, and I know the product like the back of my hand. So I'm really excited to get you guys up to speed on the best ways that you can be using contracts inside of HoneyBook. And Maggie is going to come up and help us understand a little bit better, some of the best practices when you're implementing contracts for your business. And then I'll show you how to implement those things into the HoneyBook system. So let's get Maggie up here so she can introduce herself and we can start to go through some of her amazing content and chat through all of the ways that you guys can make sure that your business is protected. And especially as we start to head into this busier season, I know business is picking up for a lot of you guys. So I know there are some common trends going on in contract law as well. Hey, Maggie, how are you?
Hi.
All right, Maggie, I'm going to let you take over from here. So I'm going to pass the slides off to you and let you introduce yourself.
Screen. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. Okay, awesome. Here we go. My name is Maggie Fisher. I am the founder of both the Artist Lawyer and Magdalena Studios. And just to give you guys a little bit about a background about me and what I do, I am a full-time wedding photographer alongside my husband, Scott. We also have a big associate team on the East Coast. We have about 12 photographers that work for us. We have about 98 weddings this year, to be precise. So I am right there in it with you guys. I'm a creative. I'm an entrepreneur. I launched the Artist Lawyer about a year and a half ago, which is my law firm where I specialize in trademarks, copyright, contracts, basically everything to protect yourself as an artist and a creative, a small business owner, because I had just found being one myself, it's hard to get started. It's hard to be an entrepreneur. It's hard to know where to look and where to turn. And even with a lot of the resources that are out there, they're not necessarily geared specifically into the niches of what it means to be an artist and a creative and how you really have to protect yourself. So that's something that I really love to focus on. It's something I'm super passionate about, and I'm so excited to be here with you guys today talking about contracts because it is so important. It is one of the number one things that you need to do to be able to protect your business. So we are going to jump right into it. Contracts 101, why you need a contract, where to find a contract, and what you need to include in your contracts as you're either purchasing them or constructing them or going to an attorney to have one constructed for you. So, okay, let's jump right into it. The first thing that I like to touch on with creatives and small business owners is why it is so, so important to have a contract set up within your business. I am always pleasantly surprised when I talk to very established business owners who operate with either no contract or a very, very minimal contract. And a lot of people, they have this mindset, which I think it's a good mindset to have this positive, optimistic mindset that they never have any issues with their clients. They have really good clientele. They don't need something super formal in place. But a lot of what I do is the retroactive side of things, that those rare times that something does go wrong, where you are then on the other side of things trying to fix what maybe wasn't included in your contract or not having a contract at all to protect yourself. So a lot of people shy away from using something more formal like a contract, but I have found that it's actually more client friendly to have something in writing where your clients can then be on the same page as you, and then you are also protecting your business. So the number one thing that's important in using a contract is protecting your business. Without a contract, you are left open to risk and liability. It is super important, especially as a creative business owner, to make sure that if your payments are non-refundable, that was a big thing this last year, making sure that it's very clear that your payments are non-refundable, why they're non-refundable, in addition to outlining other processes and responsibilities and expectations that you will have with your client and that they should have with you. But also, like I mentioned, on the client side of things, I found that it forms a super healthy client relationship when they know exactly what to expect. It was funny when I launched the Artist Lawyer, I was a little bit nervous about how my clients, because I'm still a wedding photographer and I'm sharing about being an attorney and writing contracts. And I was a little bit nervous about how that would affect my wedding client's view of me. And so many of my clients came out of the woodwork and mentioned that they actually signed on with other photographer because they were so impressed with our contract, that if we were this professional and took our contracts this seriously, imagine, how high of a service level we would provide and experience throughout their wedding planning process. And they felt comforted knowing that everything was covered and outlined in there, like when to schedule an engagement session and when to have, we'll have our final planning consultation and what they're responsible for communications wise, when we answer emails, what our office hours are, all of those important little things. It forms a super healthy client relationship. And the client can look back at this document and answer any questions that they might have about your processes and their expectations. So a lot of people always, they think it won't happen to them, that they need a contract, but it is always super, super important. If you are taking payments, if you are running a professional business, you should 100% have a contract in place so that you can protect your reputation, your time, your investments into your business, the money and your personal assets. And you can do all of this by just being proactive and putting that contract in place. So a few quick real world examples of things that I have seen. Without a contract in place, like I mentioned, you're open to liability that is kind of open-ended. So God forbid something went wrong. If a client were to come back and pursue litigation against you, if you don't have certain clauses in your contract, like a limit of liability, which would essentially state that the maximum amount that you could ever be responsible, like say, I kind of default to photography as an example. If you were to lose files or if you were not able to perform your services, the maximum amount that you could ever be responsible for in court or in litigation would be a refund of any money paid to you. And of course, you're going to want to limit that as well if you've delivered certain services or deliverables. But the maximum amount that you could ever be liable for is set in your limit of liability clause. Without a contract that stipulates this, a client could sue you for any open-ended amount. So in the wedding world, if you lost their wedding photos, they could sue you for the entire amount to recreate their entire event, to have their hair and makeup redone, to have their bouquet remade. The list could go on, and you're opening yourself up to this risk without having that contract in place. So super, super important to make sure you have that. You also will want to make sure that you have a clause in there that stipulates where any litigation would take place if anything were to go wrong. So say you didn't have a contract in place and a client was from another state and wanted to sue you, you might have to fly and travel to another state to protect yourself in court if you don't have a clause in your contract that states where any litigation or legal action would take place. So long story short, definitely have your contracts in place when you're taking on clients and getting paid. Now, when it comes to where you should find a contract, this is another aspect that I feel very, very strong about. There are so many places to get a contract from when you're starting off in your business. And that's okay at first. You might get one for free on the internet or from a friend. But investing in your legal protection is something that is invaluable because you're, like we mentioned, protecting yourself from your personal assets being on the line, from returning retainers or payments. And there's so many different ways that you can go about making sure that you have a good contract in place. So rather than going to a marketplace, I know like Etsy and other marketplaces sell contract templates, other vendors do. You want to make sure that you're always getting your contract from a licensed attorney. Attorneys are held to different ethical standards. We're obligated to keep up with the law, to keep up with things as they change. We're going to be making updates to our contracts. We're going to vary. So you can purchase a contract online from an attorney, which is going to save you money. Typically, contracts online will cost somewhere between like $400 to $800 on average. And that is going to save you if you were to, on the flip side, invest in one-on-one services with an attorney. You can always have a contract custom drafted for you. Typically, that can range from $1,500 to $3,000, $5,000, depending on how many contracts and how complex those contracts are. So you want to make sure that you're choosing the right option for you. And contract shops from an attorney are a really great way to save, to know that they are fully vetted and that they're going to protect you and your niche within your industry. I had a client this last year who used a contract template from an online marketplace, and she was left refunding retainers left and right because of COVID. So she eventually switched to using an attorney drafted contract. She had already delivered some deliverables and services. So it's super, super important that you make sure everything is, an attorney is going to make sure that there's no conflicting clauses and issues within that contract. And then these are just a few quick things that I have found can be missing from contracts that aren't through an attorney. A lot of boilerplate terms, this is like standard legalese, is missing. Sometimes when people draft them themselves, they don't realize how important these kinds of things are. So two of these things I just touched on: the limit of liability, which is going to restrict how much you can be liable for, and the governing law and venue, which is going to stipulate where any litigation or legal action would take place. Non-waiver clauses allow you to not enforce every aspect of your contract. So if you don't always enforce late fees, that means that you're not waiving the rest of enforcing the rest of your contract to the fullest extent. And there's lots of different terms like this that are usually found at the bottom of a contract that are super, super standard, but can be left out of contracts if it's not drafted or approved by an attorney who has fully vetted the agreement. So I am going to pass this back, and Mackenzie, I think you're up to give a little demo.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. So I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can take a look. I'm going to show you guys my whole desktop over here, because we're going to go into a demo with actually another HoneyBook member who's here, Amy Patrick. We're going to go through her actual contract and make sure that she has it really set up for success and she's saving herself as much time as possible. But first, I just want to show you guys kind of some basics from what Maggie was talking about in terms of using a lawyer-approved contract, HoneyBook actually does provide all of these HoneyBook templates. If you ever see a contract inside of your account that has HB template in all caps, that means that it is lawyer approved. So all of those general contracts that we include in there, or even vendor specific, industry specific contracts that are in there, are lawyer approved. So keep that in mind. Now, if you were to buy a contract from a contract shop or have a lawyer draft one up for you, it's very easy just to come right into your account and create a new contract. And then what you would do is you would simply copy and paste here to add in that information. And when you need to, so, you would have your contract. And then when you need to add specific fields where they can auto-populate with information, you can hover up here on this menu and you'll see they're different. So if you hover long enough, it'll tell you what it is basically. So these are your different field options. So when you come down here, the field name is always going to be kind of the category or the defining element that you're meant to be filling in, that it's the variable dynamic field essentially. So if project location varies from, job to job, this is the variable, but the value of that variable is going to change job to job. So that's kind of a good way to understand what adding a smart field means. And then of course you can assign the party responsible for that field. So you can say your client has the option to fill this out if it's more of like a questionnaire style that you're wanting to include in your contract, where you're just asking like, how did you hear about us, or something like that. It's an optional question for them. You can allow them to choose to edit it, or they can be required to edit it, or you can prevent them from editing it, which means that it's actually going to be highlighted for you to fill out before you send it to your client. So that's kind of our intro to adding dynamic fields. When you go into a HoneyBook template, there will be a list of instructions at the top that very clearly outline how you're meant to use that specific file type. So I would recommend just reading through those instructions really carefully, and then be sure to delete that section before you actually go to send it out to a client. That way your client isn't getting a full list of instructions on how to use a template at the top of their contract. Obviously, we want to look professional, so removing those instructions for your own use before you send it off is very crucial there. And then once you've got your contract kind of perfected and looking good, one other thing that's really worth pointing out is setting your default contract. So this is like your most commonly used. So if you have a specific package that's like your best seller and that comes connected to a specific contract, that would be an example of what you might want to set as your default template. Or if you have, 90% of your clients all get the same contract, but you have a couple that get a one-off contract, that is another example of what you would want to set as your default. So it's your most frequently used contract essentially. And what this is going to do is it's going to make sure that it auto pulls in that specific contract every time you go to book a client, so that you don't have to actually choose it from the drop-down menu. So it doesn't seem like it'll save that much time, maybe just to say that, because you can easily just choose it from the drop-down. So it saves you 2 clicks. But I always say with HoneyBook, the more clicks and time that you can save doing little things like that for yourself and kind of building those habits for yourself, the better off you're going to be, because those minutes add up at the end of the day. And that's the whole point of using the HoneyBook system. So I want to get Amy up here so that we can start going through her account. So let me invite Amy up on screen. And while she gets settled doing that, I want to introduce you guys to her contracts over here. So let's get these pulled up while we wait for Amy to come on. She's got a couple different contracts that I want to go through, and I have some notes on different things that I want to ask her about, and different suggestions that I want to give, just to kind of get a better understanding of the use cases for her contracts, how she typically uses them, and what the different fields are intended to do for her. Hi, Amy.
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're all good.
Good deal.
Awesome. Great. So yeah, I was just going to start out with your student agreement, because this is kind of the simplest one you have, I think, because in terms of talking about, so again, just to kind of set the expectation with Amy and everyone else here, Maggie's not going to be able to provide any kind of specific legal advice. Really, all we're meant to go through is making sure that the tool, the contract as a tool in HoneyBook, is set up properly to save you as much time as possible. So that's how we're approaching it, is really just from a technical aspect, not from a legal aspect.
Okay.
So that being said, the main area for the student contract that we can focus on is down at the bottom where you have this state field. So is this dependent upon the client's state or your state?
Hang on, the video's blurry. Let me click into that contract.
Okay.
On another screen here. So we're in the student agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And which section are you in?
It's under legal disputes.
Okay.
Section 7.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm almost there.
No worries.
Okay. So I'm sorry. What was the question again?
So is the state dependent on your state, or is it the student state that'll be filled in here?
This will be my state. I will tell you, this is a template that I got when I received my life coaching certification. Mm-hmm. So this is, I had this auto uploaded to HoneyBook. So this is one of the first times that I'm really starting to dig into this.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, that's no problem. I would say if this is going to be your state, it's probably not necessary to have it as a dynamic field, because if it's just going to be your state every single time, we can probably just replace that field with the actual name of the state that you're in. Okay. Now, if it's going to be a variable, then obviously we can adjust that to be, a smart field or something that can auto-populate based off of the client's location or something like that. So if we wanted to change this field, for example, to be more like the client's address or something, we could set it up like this. And right away, when you go to type in the field name, if HoneyBook has the ability to auto-populate it or pull that information from somewhere else in the system, it'll let you know by stating it under this category. So you can add a custom field, which will basically just mean you have to type it in every time, or the client has to type it in every time, which is fine, because there's certain information that HoneyBook doesn't have access to. So that's just how it's going to be sometimes. But if the system does have access to that, we'll let you know and allow you to pull that information in by clicking one of these fields like that. But for the time being, I'm just going to leave it as the custom field of state for you. Sure. And then, of course, you can always adjust to say who fills it in too. So, of course, if it's your state, you'll want to mark it as can't edit, because that'll highlight it for yourself to fill out and the client won't be able to adjust it at all. Okay. Or if it's their state, then you want to maybe make it a required field for them by selecting this.
Okay.
So those are kind of your options there. Another general rule of thumb is you almost always want to leave the field value blank here, because you don't ever want to add client-specific information into a contract template, because every contract is going to be variable and change from client to client. So you always want to leave field value blank, but field name can still be, defined and categorized and left as like a smart field option too. Okay, so the other one that I wanted to go through, the main one I think that I have the majority of feedback on, is the client coaching agreement. Mm-hmm. Just because there's a lot of different fields to go through, and I just want to make sure that we have them all kind of set up for success here. So actually, if anyone is curious how Amy got this header up here, it's again one of these kind of smart fields up here, and it's actually going to be this icon to add the header, and that's going to pull information from her account settings section in HoneyBook, which is almost like a digital business card for the client. So if anyone's interested in having that at the top of their contract, that's the icon you would choose from it. It's the second from the right at the top of the page. In regards to all these different fields, I would just click in and just kind of make sure that the smart field is the one that's being used. Even if our team was the one to set them up for you, mistakes happen. They're setting up a lot of accounts. So it's always good to just go through and double check their work and make sure that the smart fields are always the ones being used, which they are, so that's good. And then you set them to can't edit, or they are required to fill again. So I would just go through each of those. And then the other question that I had here was around this section. How did you learn about us? It looks like maybe this answer field got put in the wrong place because it's kind of cutting off the question. And then rather than having, this be required, like newsletter answer, I would probably make this a can edit. And rather than saying answer, I might say like yes, no, to let them know that they have the option of saying, did you hear about us from the newsletter? Did you hear about us through a referral or something like that? Another suggestion that I had is this is actually a question that you can add to the contact form so that when clients are initially inquiring, they can select from a drop-down how they heard about you, and that'll actually generate a lead source report inside of HoneyBook. So without even really trying, you'll be collecting that information from them, and HoneyBook will be categorizing that to say, where all your leads are coming from, who's ultimately booking with you, the value of those bookings, the time to booking. So I would recommend, rather than having that question in your contract, having that earlier in the process in the contact form.
I agree.
Okay, cool. One last thing here, and then I'm going to pass it back to Maggie so we don't run out of time to go through everything. I think this section is good to say, the proposal total amount per package name. That's where I get a little hung up, because the proposal total is likely going to vary from client to client.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on how you have your pricing set up, it's not going to be per package. It's more going to be like per invoice. So just depending on how you have your pricing set up, I would just make sure that the verbiage there and the fields there make sense for how you have your pricing. Of course, if you're only sending one invoice per package, then this makes sense. But I find oftentimes that's not the case. Usually it's, multiple sessions and multiple billing cycles and things in one invoice.
Yes.
So I would just double check your work on that.
Okay.
And I think there was maybe one more section down. Nope, that was it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was everything for that one. And I'm going to pass it back to Maggie just so we have enough time for everything. But those were really my main suggestions. And then, of course, just making sure that the fields are assigned to the correct party for, whoever responsible is for filling those things out.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Okay, Maggie, I'm going to pass it back to you. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Those are such helpful tips. That was awesome to hear. So I wanted to jump into a few industry-specific clauses and things to think about depending on what type of creative or artist that you are. I found it super important to make sure that you're utilizing a contract that's very specific to your industry and your niche. So for example, I'm going to go through a couple different types of industries. So for photographers, one of the things that I often find missing is a style of work clause that essentially states that the client is acknowledging that they have reviewed the photographer's portfolio. They understand the style and the type of work, especially right now when there are so many different types of styles of photography out there, that they're acknowledging that this is the type of work that the photographer does, and that they're signing off on this style of photography so that the artist or creative is able to create their subjective artwork up to their own discretion without a client coming back and saying, oh, I wanted you to go light and airy and you're more of like a dark and moody photographer. For graphic and web designers, what I often find missing in contracts is a change of scope clause, which essentially would allow a graphic designer to come back and say, this is the scope of the project has changed so much that it has gone beyond what was originally contracted if they're like continuing to add things on or change the direction. And it would require a new contract, a new proposal, a new estimate in order to move forward. There's also something called a kill fee that you can incorporate into your contracts, especially for designers. And that essentially protects you and the client if for some reason you guys begin the design process and things are just not aligning between the two of you, that there is a specific kill fee in order to call the project off. You're both agreeing that at this point, or whichever point in time it might be, that this is the agreed upon amount to just go separate ways if you guys can't move forward into a certain direction. For business coaches, I know a lot of coaches and educators have online community spaces. I often find missing in coaches' contracts language around group settings and confidentiality, where a lot of confidential and proprietary information can be shared between individuals within a group setting. So it's really important to consider what is confidential. Will you be sharing things that people share with you? Or can you share things that are shared in a group setting? And can third parties? And what are your policies around those kinds of things? You can incorporate that into your contract as well. And for virtual assistants, something that's important to think about is work product. Who owns the work product? Is it a work for hire project where the person hiring you would own anything that's created and you would therefore transfer the copyright of anything that you create? And a non-disclosure agreement. If you're working for somebody, you might want to include that in your contract, that you will be keeping everything confidential between the two of you. It could just allow anybody hiring you to feel even more comfortable and confident bringing you onto their team and disclosing any kind of information that would be helpful to you in your job. So current issues in contract law. I know I'm throwing a lot of different clauses and things out there at you guys, so I hope a couple of these things stick. And I just want to talk through a few different things that I am seeing right now in the world, now that we're operating and things are opening back up at full speed. There's different issues that I'm seeing play out now that a lot of business is starting to pick back up. So something that you'll want to be aware of within your contracts, if you are a creative or artist that travels, you're going to want to consider a travel warranty clause and a reimbursement clause. Worst case scenario, if you got stuck quarantining somewhere or being somewhere for longer than you expected due to flight delays or having to quarantine or anything else like that, you would want to make sure that your contract allows you to pass those costs and expenses over to the client or whoever is hiring you rather than that falling on you. There's a lot of issues with flights right now, being able to get flights, flights being canceled. So it's important for you to have open communication with your clients and to make sure that your clauses are super, super clear about travel warranty, being unable to make something, and those costs being passed on to the client if something unexpected does come up. Another important clause, if you are in the events industry or if you are a service provider, is allowing for a replacement at your discretion. A lot of old contracts that I have recently reviewed include language that requires the client to sign off on any replacement, which can leave you in a vulnerable position if for some reason you can't make an event or provide a service and you have a team that you can send on your behalf. It's something you'll just want to think about, being able to send a replacement at your discretion if that's something that aligns with your process and services. Another aspect now, since so much has changed, the direction of things, the style, taste, everything has changed so much with projects that were paused due to COVID or things just slowing down and now picking back up. So change of scope, which I touched on a little bit whether you're in the events industry or if you're a designer, things can change so much if events are moving from fall to spring, or if you're a designer and the style has changed from one thing to another thing, or their needs and projects have been paused. So including a change of scope clause so that you're able to modify and send a new proposal if necessary. If there are changes within what you originally contracted for, and leaving it up to your discretion as a business owner if you even have the capacity to take something that might be a massive change of scope, making sure that you actually have the capacity and the discretion to be able to say no to things if the change doesn't align with something that you can provide. So we're going to talk through some best practices, and this is going to tie back into how you guys use HoneyBook within your business. So we already chatted through some boilerplate terms that are super important in including. We saw that, you know, up at the top of the contract, you can have all of the project and client specific language automatically input, having your packages, your collections, whatever it is that you're including automatically input, due dates, all of that important language being built right into the contract. Another super important practice is to make sure that your contract auto expires. I include language at the top of my contracts that states that the proposal and the contract that the client is seeing is good for 14 days. I have had it happen to me in the past where a client comes back 6 months down the road, maybe you send a proposal and they just try to go and sign that contract. And maybe you're not available for that date anymore, or you don't have the capacity to take this project on, but they might go into an old proposal and just try to like sign on. Maybe your prices have been updated. So it's super important that if you can set this up so that your contract just auto expires and they won't be able to sign it after 14 days, it also gives them a little bit of like a driving force to get that proposal completed with you. If you can set your contract to be automatically delivered once it is fully executed, it is best practice to make sure that you're countersigning your agreements if you have to manually go in and do that, and then sending that fully executed agreement over to the client so that they have a copy of that signed contract. Auto payment reminders I have found super helpful. From a legal perspective, you can customize those auto reminders and just alert them. You're giving them a heads up and giving them notice. Your payment is due in 7 days. Your payment is due in 5 days. Your payment's due in 1 day. Your payment is now 2 days late. Late fees will begin to apply in 5 days. And just letting them know in accordance with your contract what those policies and terms are and giving them that notice. So it is in their emails and they are very, very aware of what your contract states and they've received notice, and it's automated so that you don't even have to worry about it. I also find that it's just important to make it your policy that you will not begin any work until those onboarding materials are fully executed. For me, that means a signed contract and that initial payment or retainer. So I will not turn away other work. I will not begin providing services, having meetings, any of that until those things are fully executed and completed. I have found when people make those exceptions, maybe somebody signs the contract but doesn't pay, or pays and doesn't sign the contract, you really want to make sure that you reiterate, hey, your date's not booked, or this project can't begin. Please get these all completed, and just let them know, this is your process, and stick to it. And I think we are going to pass it right back to Mackenzie now.
Awesome. Perfect. So I want to show you guys how you would go about sharing a contract inside of HoneyBook, just to start. And then from there, we'll go into, talking about auto expiring, talking about auto payment reminders, talking about sending the executed contract to your clients and how all of that works in HoneyBook, because Spoiler alert, it all can be done in one place. So we'll go through that in just a second. But when it comes to actually sharing a contract with the client, there are a couple different ways to go about it. So the first way is actually just to send a one-off contract. So this is great in the case where you take payment and signature on different days. So if you're someone who, maybe you have in your initial booking, you collect signature and payment, but then there's some kind of secondary or even tertiary contract that you're sending at another point during the process. That would be an example of when you might send a one-off contract. Now, I'm going to show you guys how this works when you go to send a one-off contract in HoneyBook, because it's a little bit more labor intensive when it comes to those smart fields, because a lot of those smart fields are meant to work with the proposal file specifically. So I'm going to show you guys how sending a one-off contract can be a little bit more labor intensive, just to kind of push the idea that sending the proposal at the time of booking is really the best way to do things. So when you're sending a one-off contract right away, we can see a lot of those smart fields that we were checking out earlier are auto-populating. So agreement date right away is filling in with today's date. It's filling in with the client's name. It's letting us know what kind of project we're working on with them. But right away, we can see that the payment amounts are left blank. And I don't really have a reference point on this page of what the client is, being charged for. I would have to backtrack and maybe pop into the files section and try to see if there was a previously sent invoice or even a previously drafted invoice, and click in there and then remember that information and go back into the contract and fill it out. So this is why using a proposal file at the time of booking is best. So I'll show you right now what I mean by that. So when you go into a proposal, you actually don't have to start from a template at all. You can start from a blank version, because from inside of this file, you have the ability to pull in different templates as well. So I'm going to start down on the third page and work backwards just to show you guys. So if you wanted to choose a different contract template, now remember we were talking about the default contract template. This is my default contract template, so that's the one that's populating here. If I wanted to choose a different one, I could easily reference this drop-down menu and select a different contract template if I needed to pull in a different one, but this one is the one that I use for 90% of my clients, so it looks fine. And we can see these numbers are zeroed out because I haven't added any packages above. So once I start to customize this billing document, this contract document for my client, so let's say they're getting this package from me, and I'm going to actually customize it. I'm going to get rid of this line item and this line item, and I'm actually going to add on some additional services. So I'm getting really customized here, but right away we're seeing how easy it is to pull that information in based off of the package templates that I already have built in my master template section and the contract templates that I already have built as well. So I've just made a completely custom package that no one's ever gotten from me before, but it only took a couple clicks. I can go down here and adjust my payment schedule. So let's say we're going to do 3 payments, and we're just going to divide them equally just for the sake of convenience today. But if you wanted to change the amount, you could hover and click in to change it. And same thing for due date. So now down in the contract, all of this information is filling in. So we can see how much more robust this document is allowed to be. This is actually the same exact contract template as I was just using in the one-off contract file. But because it wasn't in the proposal, it didn't even have the field to be able to pull in the services because there was no reference point for the system to be able to pull from. So when you attach the contract into this proposal document and have it as a component living here, it's a lot more dynamic, it's a lot more functional, and it's going to save you a lot more time. So you can see the payment amounts are filling in as well, and you've just saved yourself a ton of time. The payment schedules are populating here too. So it's really easy, and this is going to make sure that your contract is working as hard as possible for you. HoneyBook is working as hard as possible for you without you having to really lift a finger. Now, if you wanted to one-off decide to set some parameters around expiring this file, you would have to find this kind of hidden menu over here. Open that up, make sure you're in the Options tab, and then you have the option to expire this file here. Now, like I said, this is kind of a one-off instance. I'm going to show you in a little bit where to set that up in your preferences to make sure that every contract or every proposal file auto expires after a certain amount of time, but this is where you would control that. And I want to show you guys from the client view as well what this file looks like, because as we were discussing with Maggie, it's very important to collect signature and have them agree to your legal terms of business before you collect any payment or before you start performing any work for this client, because we need to make sure that we're all on the same page before money is ever involved. So right away from the client view, you'll see that the pages have actually changed order a little bit. So the first thing that they're going to see is reviewing what services they're going to be receiving from you and the price point associated with those things, the payment schedule. And then if they're ready to move forward with booking you, they can continue on to the next page, which is going to be your contract, where they can review all of your legal terms. They can fill out any fields that you've left for them to fill out. But most importantly, there's a digital signature field at the bottom. There's also room for yourself to sign. So your client will sign first. HoneyBook will notify you that that signature has come through, and you go in and countersign. At the time of countersigning, HoneyBook will pose the question to you, would you like to send this document back to your client for reference? Per Maggie's advice, we know that's a best practice, so go ahead and send it to them, but you don't have to. If for whatever reason you don't want to send them that version, you can just sign it and leave that file in their client portal for reference as well. So they'll go through, they'll sign the document. They actually will not be able to click this payment button until they have signed here. So they will be required to sign. This button would basically be grayed out until they sign the document, and then they would be able to click through and actually go ahead and pay you. And that makes sure that everything is set up in the correct order. You're always legally protected. And again, this file is just so powerful. It's really the best one to use for all parties involved anyways. So that's kind of the client side experience. And I want to show you guys what it looks like in the company settings to set up auto expiring, to set up payment reminders, and even customize the payment reminders to include specific language according to whatever contract terms you have. So Maggie was referencing, you know, if they're 2 days overdue and you start charging late fees at the 7-day mark, maybe in your past due payment reminder, you want to reference that. So all I did to get here, I came up to my profile picture, I clicked company settings, I came down to preferences, and at the bottom of the page, we have our payment reminders. You can toggle these off. We recommend leaving them on. We actually see 90% of payments that come through HoneyBook with payment reminders turned on or before their due date. So again, just saving you time and those awkward conversations when you leave those on. And then, like I was saying too, you can customize the language in these. So for example, if on the payment due date, you'd like to say something specific, like, you know, heads up, if you don't pay today, there's going to be a late fee tomorrow, or whatever your contract states. It's always good to reiterate that in the email as well, because, you know, a contract is, I know someone said earlier, I feel like my clients, when they look at a contract, that's as blurry as it is on the screen for the video webcast. So, you know, contracts are busy documents. Your clients might be confused by them. So it's always good to reiterate very specific items in your emails as often as possible. And just remember that that contract is the main legal document there. So that's where you would control that. And then in terms of setting files to auto expire, that would be expire proposal and invoice 2 weeks after sending them. So that would be this right here under your actions. You would just toggle that on, and then you can set the parameters of the timing of that here too. So all that is under the preferences tab. Okay, I'm going to pass it back to Maggie to wrap things up, and then we're going to open it up to questions from you guys.
Cool.
Great.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so we're just gonna wrap up. I am so thankful that you guys are here, that you guys are getting ahead of the 8 ball with just protecting your business, making sure everything's set up professionally. I am such a firm believer in having a professional foundation before you bring on more clients. You'll be able to scale, grow, serve your clients better, more and more easily, the more that you set yourself up for success from the get-go and invest in that foundation and that professionalism. For the next 48 hours, I created a discount code for you guys for 25% off contract templates. The code is HoneyBook25, and you can go to theartistlawyer.com/shop to get those discounts. They're super thorough, very detailed, extensive industry-specific contracts. If you guys have any questions, you can always reach out. And if you guys want to stay in touch, if you have any questions, I'm here to help you guys. Being an attorney for artists and creatives is my passion. It is my passion project. I love doing it. It feels like what I was meant to do, to merge these two passions and crafts together. So if there's anything that I can do to help you guys or answer, please feel free to reach out. And I think we can open up the floor for questions now.
Amazing. Great. Yeah. So I just put it in the chat too, but if you guys want to download the slide deck or check out the slide deck, we have a copy down there where it says download the slide deck. That'll open it up in a Google Slides for you. And then we also just opened up a poll at the bottom of the page just to get feedback from you guys on how you felt about the content today. If this was helpful for you, if you would recommend this to a friend. It's literally just one question. So please give us your feedback there. And then let's get into some questions. So someone asked, for recurring payments, is there a way to set it for weekly instead of monthly within the proposal? There is not right now. It is a feature request that we get a lot. So we will be hopefully adding it soon. I know the team is working on that. But for now, recurring payments are strictly on a monthly basis. That's a great question. So just for anyone who isn't aware, HoneyBook can have recurring payments, but you have to set it on a monthly basis. You can choose the monthly billing date that you'd like, and then set that up in HoneyBook to recur almost like a subscription style payment rather than breaking the grand total down across multiple payments. Let's see, is there a way to reset the templates to populate templates that are more appropriate to your industry? I selected planning upon setting up my HoneyBook account, but I actually am more closely aligned with coaching. So that's a great question. If you guys ever, I know there was another question about someone who edited their HoneyBook template, but now they want the original HoneyBook template back. Our concierge team is here 7 days a week, and they can easily re-enter that information into your account if you reach out with just the name of the template that you edited, or if you say, hey, do you have any coaching specific templates that you guys can inject into my account? They would be happy to do that for you. And you can live chat with them in the bottom right-hand corner of your HoneyBook account whenever you're logged in. They would be happy to do that for you. Let's see, is there a way to have footers or subscript or superscript within a contract? The formatting in the HoneyBook contract is pretty limited, I would say. Let me actually double check on that. I know you cannot include a footer per se. There's just that one header image. But in terms of, here, let me share my screen so I can show you guys. Cool. So in terms of formatting, we really just have this option here around, different sizing of the text. So that would be kind of your main way of doing it, or, underlining, changing the background of it to highlight certain text areas. You can add a line, like a page break in the middle of it. But besides that, there's no way to include any kind of like superscript or anything like that outside of just the normal formatting options. Amy says, does HoneyBook have a coupon offer option for us to offer clients? I think, Amy, are you asking about our referral program? Can you just clarify for me in the chat, and then I'll come back to you. This was the person who modified their templates and now they want the original template back. So just go ahead and chat with concierge for that one. They'll be happy to help you out. Maggie, this one's more for you, I think. The information on clauses is incredible. Is there somewhere we can access a list of clauses that are legal and typical for various different industries?
Yeah, so I dropped my website in the chat. I would recommend going to our shop page and clicking on the different industry contract templates that we offer. And we actually show what clauses are in each contract. Not all of them, but a good list of like 12 to 15 that we include. So you can check it out there and just get an idea of the types of clauses that we'd recommend for each different type of industry.
Great. Okay, cool. So Amy, I think you're asking about coupon, to offer your clients. There's no discount code like that because you ultimately control the invoice that's sent to your clients. So you can always input a discount amount in there for them, but there's nothing like enter this coupon code at checkout kind of a thing, because HoneyBook is more around services than products. And typically when you're purchasing a product is when you enter a coupon code like that. Whereas when you're receiving services, it's more like just an invoice that you receive. So for that reason, we allow you to control what discounts are being added in as line items into the invoice at the time of send. So if you want to do that, you can always put the value in the discount field for your clients, or even give it a name and add it as a line item inside of the proposal itself. Shanti said she was trying to edit the words in the header and she couldn't do it. That is actually how it's supposed to work. This information is actually pulled from your account settings. So similar to how we were in our company settings just a couple minutes ago to adjust the payment reminders, if you come up to my account, this is where all of that information pulls from. So just make sure that this is all up to date and looks the way you want it to. Sometimes it also pulls information from here, but I think the majority of the information is pulled from here besides like your company name. So I would just make sure that all of that is up to date, and then it'll go ahead and pull into the contract accurately. Lisa and some other people are wanting to know how you add a signature line to a contract, not just in the proposal. So as soon as you go to send a contract, whether it's in a proposal file or even if it's just a one-off contract, so in the master template section, you guys are totally correct. The signature line does not show, but once you go to pull it into a project and share it with a client, that signature line will be there. So I can show you, once you pull it into the project at the bottom of the page, the signature lines are there based off of the number of participants in the project, basically. So it's all encrypted. So when you send any kind of file to anyone through HoneyBook, it's going to come as like an encrypted link in their email, which allows them to access HoneyBook without having to log in. And that's also tied to their signature field. So you'll want to make sure that you have as many people as need to sign the contract as are participants inside of that project as well. So you won't need to add it into the contract template. HoneyBook will automatically do it once you go to share the file, basically, is the answer to that one. Let's see. When I add a client, are they sent the package automatically to view? They are not. So I guess it depends. If you're using the proposal file, we just went through the client view. I know that question actually came in before we got into this portion of the demo. So hopefully that was able to answer that question for you. Can the invoice amount be changed after it was sent? Yes, absolutely. Anytime you send a file in HoneyBook, when you come back into it, so right now we're in draft mode, so I can go in and easily edit. But if I had already sent this file, whether it's a proposal, an invoice, whatever, there's always going to be a big edit button up here, kind of in place of where this client view button is now. And that'll allow you to go in and adjust anything you need. You could edit the contract, you could edit the invoice amount, and all of that information would populate, and it would basically save as like a version 2 of this file for you. Absolutely. We are down to the last minute, you guys. So Maggie, thank you so much for your time. I know this was really valuable information for the audience, and we just so appreciate your insights about all of this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Awesome.
And I love HoneyBook. I love everything you guys are doing, and it's so awesome that you're providing this kind of value as well.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.